History is not a straight line. It is a labyrinth filled with doors we were never supposed to open. For centuries, our textbooks have told us a neat, orderly story. We started as primitive hunter-gatherers, slowly learned to farm, built simple villages, and eventually stepped into the modern world. But what happens when we dig up objects that completely shatter that timeline? Artifacts crafted with a level of precision, geographic knowledge, or mystery that simply should not exist according to mainstream archaeology. Today, we are diving deep into 7 ancient discoveries that will make you question everything you thought you knew about the past. Let's start our journey in France with an artifact that spent more than a century hiding in plain sight, literally forming the foundation of a modern structure before anyone realized what it actually was. Back in the year 1900, archaeologists were excavating a prehistoric burial ground in Brittany, France, specifically at the Saint-Bélec tumulus in Luhan. Among the pile of unearthed stones, they found a massive, rugged slab of schist weighing over a metric ton and covered from edge to edge in deeply carved geometric grooves and unusual motifs. At the time, early 20th century archaeology wasn't quite equipped to understand what they were looking at. They saw some interesting lines, took a few basic notes, and then, well, they sort of packed it away. In fact, for over a century, the slab was literally used as a building block, tucked away and forgotten in the cellar of a nearby castle, the Château de Kernout. Can you imagine that? A piece of history that could rewrite our understanding of European cartography was literally being used as a structural filler. It wasn't until the year 2014, more than 100 years later, that a team of modern researchers and archaeologists decided to take a fresh look at the slab. They hauled it out of the cellar and subjected it to cutting-edge technology, high-resolution 3D laser scanning and photogrammetry. And what they discovered completely blew their minds. When the digital models were processed, the researchers noticed something astonishing. Those chaotic-looking grooves weren't random artistic decorations or abstract doodles. They were a map, specifically a topographical map of a stretch of the Odette River Valley in western France. When scientists compared the carvings on the stone to modern geographical layouts, the correlation was staggering. The carvings matched an 80% spatial accuracy of a 30-kilometer-long stretch of the river landscape. The slab features repeated motifs, raised bumps, and lines that correspond precisely to river bends, valley networks, and ancient land boundaries of the early Bronze Age, roughly dating back between 2150 and 1600 BCE. Think about the implications of this for a second. Long before Google Earth, long before satellites, long before modern paper maps or even sophisticated surveying tools, and Bronze Age communities sat down and carved a 3-dimensional representation of their entire territory onto a slab of stone. They didn't just map out rivers, they mapped out power, ownership, and geography from a bird's-eye perspective, a perspective we usually assume ancient people didn't possess. Today, the Saint-Bélec Slab is officially recognized as the oldest known map of a territory in Europe. But it also leaves us with a lingering question. If a local community thousands of years ago possessed the knowledge and motivation to create a precise 3D topographical model of their land, what else did they map out that we haven't found yet? And how many other historical treasures are currently sitting right beneath our feet or hidden away in dusty castle cellars, waiting for us to finally open our eyes? Now, let's cross the Atlantic Ocean and travel from the rolling hills of France to the dense, tropical lowlands of Mexico. Here we encounter an object that shook the foundations of Mesoamerican history, challenging everything we thought we knew about the origins of writing in the New World. The story begins in the late 1990s, in the heartland of the ancient Olmec civilization, specifically in Veracruz, Mexico. Road builders and construction workers were cutting through a ridge in an area known as Lomas de Tacamichapan. While clearing the earth and unearthing debris, they stumbled upon a heavy, dark block of stone. At first glance, it didn't look like much, just a rectangular slab of serpentine rock, weighing about 26 pounds and fitting comfortably in the hands of an adult. But once the dirt was wiped away, the workers and later archaeologists realized they were looking at something extraordinary. The block was meticulously carved on one of its flat faces, covered entirely in a grid-like arrangement of incised symbols. When experts analyzed it, they counted 62 distinct glyphs. And that is where the real mystery begins. You see, before the discovery of the Cascajal Block, mainstream historical consensus held that writing in the Americas didn't emerge until much later, around 300 to 500 BCE, heavily associated with the Zapotec culture or later Maya civilizations. But when researchers used archaeological context, pottery fragments and sediment layers found right alongside the block, they dated the Cascajal find to approximately 900 BCE. Let that sink in. This stone predates any known writing system in the Western Hemisphere by centuries. But the mystery goes even deeper than its age. When linguists and epigraphers tried to read the text, they hit a brick wall. Unlike Maya hieroglyphs, which we can largely translate, or Egyptian hieroglyphs unlocked by the Rosetta Stone, the symbols on the Cascajal block remain completely unreadable. The symbols themselves are fascinating. They depict everyday objects from the Olmec world: insects, maize, animals, celestial bodies, and geometric shapes. More importantly, several of these symbols appear repeatedly in structured sequences. In linguistics, repetition is the hallmark of syntax and true written language. It's not just a collection of random pictures, it's a message. Yet because we have nothing else like it from this specific Olmec era, we have no bilingual dictionary or comparative text to crack the code. For years, a small circle of skeptics even questioned whether the block was a modern hoax planted by local workers. However, rigorous geological testing of the serpentine stone and microscopic analysis of the weathering inside the deep grooves proved that the carvings are ancient, authentic, and untouched by modern tools. Today, the Cascajal block sits in a museum in Mexico, holding its secrets tight. It stands as a profound reminder that civilizations rose and communicated in ways that time tried to erase. The Olmecs left us a message in stone, carved over 3,000 years ago, and we are still standing here, staring at it, waiting for the day we can finally read what they had to say. Leaving the tropical lowlands of Mexico behind, our journey now takes us across the Atlantic to the rolling, emerald green hills of Dorset, England. Here, carved directly into a steep chalk hillside, lies one of the most striking, bizarre, and fiercely debated monuments in the entire world: the Serna Abbas giant. If you approach the quiet village of Serna Abbas and look up at the steep hillside towering above it, you are instantly confronted by a colossal figure. Standing an incredible 55 meters, or about 180 feet tall, this naked giant is outlined by trenches cut deep into the white chalk bedrock, contrasting sharply against the lush green grass. In his right hand, he brandishes a massive, heavy-knotted club. His posture is powerful, defiant, and impossible to ignore. But it is his explicit anatomical detail that has made him both a local legend and a permanent fixture of British folklore. For centuries, the big question has been, who carved him and why? For a very long time, local lore and traditional historians pointed toward ancient history. Some Victorian writers confidently claimed he was a depiction of the Greco-Roman hero Hercules, created by Roman soldiers occupying Britain. Others believed he was a prehistoric fertility symbol, tied to ancient Celtic rituals celebrating earth, harvest, and life. After all, standing on a hillside overlooking the countryside, fertility and protection seem like logical themes for such a monumental figure. However, modern science tends to complicate a good story. In recent decades, researchers decided to use modern archaeological techniques, specifically optically stimulated luminescence or OSL dating, to find out when the chalk trenches were actually exposed to sunlight for the first time. The results shocked many people. The scientific data suggested that the giant might not be ancient Roman or prehistoric at all. Instead, soil samples pointed to a creation date around the late Saxon period, roughly 1000 CE, or perhaps even during the early medieval era. But here's the catch. Why would a medieval or Saxon community carve a giant, naked figure into a hillside? There are 0 written records, 0 medieval chronicles, and 0 historical documents mentioning the giant until the late 17th century. It is as if he was completely invisible to historians for hundreds of years, until suddenly he appeared in records around the 1640s. Some modern researchers have even suggested he might have been a satirical political caricature of Oliver Cromwell, created during the English Civil War. Imagine that, a giant political meme carved into a hill centuries before the internet even existed. Today, the Cerne Abbas giant is fiercely protected by the National Trust. Millions of visitors hike up the Dorset Hills every year to stand at his feet, look out over the sweeping landscape, and wonder about his true identity. Was he an ancient pagan god of fertility, a Roman hero, a medieval riddle, or a 17th century political joke? Perhaps we will never know for sure, but as long as he stands on that green hillside, glaring out across the English countryside, he reminds us that the landscape itself can be a canvas for secrets that time refuses to wash away. Staying in England, we move from the grassy hills of Dorset to a quiet ploughed field in Staffordshire. Here, in July of 2009, a metal detectorist made a discovery that completely shattered our traditional gloomy view of the so-called Dark Ages. Terry Herbert, an experienced metal detectorist, had received permission from a local farmer to scan a freshly ploughed field near the village of Hammerwich. He expected to find a few old coins or a rusty horseshoe. Instead, his metal detector picked up a massive, concentrated signal deep beneath the soil. As he began to dig, glittering fragments of gold and silver started spilling out of the earth. When archaeologists finally tallied up the final count, they realized they had uncovered the largest collection of Anglo-Saxon gold and silver ever found in history. Over 4,000 distinct items, weighing a staggering total of more than 5 kilograms of pure gold. But what makes the Staffordshire Hoard truly mind-blowing isn't just the weight of the precious metal. It is the astonishing quality of the craftsmanship. For generations, we've been taught that the centuries following the fall of the Roman Empire were a period of cultural decline and intellectual darkness. But this hoard proves the exact opposite. The items found in that field represent the absolute pinnacle of early medieval art. Among the collection, you find intricately crafted cheek pieces from helmets, gold sword hilts encrusted with garnet cloisonné, and stunning Christian pectoral crosses. The detail is so microscopic that modern jewelers look at these artifacts in pure awe, wondering how 7th century artisans managed to carve such delicate patterns without modern tools. Yet, as you examine the hoard closely, a deeply unsettling mystery emerges. Almost none of the items are whole. They were systematically dismantled, ripped apart, bent, and hacked into pieces before being buried. Beautiful sword pommels had their gold ripped off. Decorative plates were brutally folded in half. Why would anyone take works of absolute artistic genius and destroy them before burying them in a random field? Historians have fiercely debated the purpose. Was it a massive war chest, hidden by an Anglo-Saxon warlord fleeing an army? Was it a ritual offering to gods after a bloody battle, where the wealth of enemies was killed so it could pass into the afterlife? Today, the Staffordshire Hoard shines brilliantly behind museum glass. It stands as a glittering testament to a forgotten era of supreme artistry, reminding us that the Dark Ages were actually blazing with light, gold, and mysteries we are still trying to piece back together. Leaving the glittering gold of Anglo-Saxon England behind, our journey takes a dramatic turn eastward, deep into the vast, freezing wilderness of Russia's Ural Mountains. Here, stretched across ancient river cliffs and hidden inside subterranean caves, lies an enigmatic gallery of prehistoric art known as the Ural Petroglyphs. The Ural Range has long served as the great geographical dividing line between Europe and Asia, a rugged landscape of dense pine forests, rushing rivers, and towering limestone cliffs. For centuries, local hunters, travelers, and indigenous tribes whispered stories about strange red and yellow paintings smeared high up on sheer rock faces, towering over rivers like the Tagil, the Rej, and the Urazan, as well as the dark chambers of the famous Shulgan Tash cave. When modern archaeologists and researchers finally ventured out to document these sites, they found something extraordinary. Thousands of individual petroglyphs and pictographs, painted or pecked into the stone, dating back anywhere from 4,000 to over 14,000 years into the deep prehistoric past. At first glance, some of the imagery feels familiar. You see magnificent depictions of woolly mammoths, wild horses, woolly rhinos, and giant deer, animals that roamed these frozen steppes during the Upper Paleolithic era. These breathtaking drawings prove that ancient Siberian and Uralian hunters stood face to face with megafauna that have been extinct for millennia, capturing their essence with iron oxide pigments that somehow survived thousands of harsh winters. But as you move deeper into the petroglyph sites, the art takes a profoundly strange and mysterious turn. Alongside the real-world animals, the rocks are covered in abstract geometric grids, checkerboard patterns, strange zigzags, and stylized humanoid figures wearing elaborate helmet-like headgear. Some panels feature hybrid creatures, beings that are part human, part animal, or symbols that resemble modern technological schematics, maps, or cosmic diagrams. And that is where the great debate begins. What were ancient humans trying to communicate on these remote, freezing cliffsides? Mainstream archaeologists suggest these sites were sacred, shamanic sanctuaries. They argue that the caves and sheer cliffs served as spiritual portals where shamans entered altered states of consciousness, painting visions from trances, spirit journeys, or ancient cosmological myths about the creation of the world. Yet, alternative researchers and crypto-historians look at the same geometric grids, helmeted figures, and star-like symbols and wonder if there is more to the story. Could these petroglyphs be records of encounters with sky beings or encoded star charts left behind by a forgotten Ice Age civilization that possessed advanced geographical or astronomical knowledge? Today, many of these Ural rock art sites are fading away, threatened by acid rain, industrial pollution, and the relentless forces of weathering. Yet they continue to stand in the freezing silence of the Russian wilderness. They are ancient windows into a mind we barely understand, reminding us that tens of thousands of years ago, human beings stood before the same towering cliffs, gazed up at the stars, and tried to leave a permanent mark of their existence for a future they could never possibly imagine. Now, let's cross the Atlantic once more and travel to the United States, deep into the rocky terrain of Massachusetts. Here we encounter one of the most polarizing and controversial objects in alternative archaeology, an item known simply as the Dorchester Pot. The story dates back to a hot summer day in June 1852, in a place called Dorchester, which is now part of Boston. Workers at the Meeting House Hill Quarry were doing heavy blasting, using massive charges of gunpowder to shatter solid blocks of stone. The explosion ripped through a massive layer of solid Roxbury conglomerate rock, about 15 feet below the surface. Amidst the flying debris and shattered stone, the workers noticed something completely out of place. It was two pieces of a bell-shaped metallic vessel that had been blasted right out of the middle of the solid rock. When the two pieces were fitted back together, they formed a vase or pot standing about 4.5 inches tall. But the material and design of the object were what truly shocked everyone. The pot was made of a strange metal alloy containing a large amount of zinc with a significant overlay of silver. Inserting the body of the pot were exquisite carvings of floral bouquets, inlaid with pure silver, along with a vine or wreath design crafted with remarkable artistic skill. And that brings us straight into the heart of the great geological controversy. According to the official geological reports of the era, the Roxbury conglomerate rock encasing that pot was estimated to be well over 500 million years old, dating back to the Ordovician period. Let that sink in for a moment. 500 million years ago, complex human life did not exist on Earth. There were no metallurgists, no flower arrangement artists, and certainly no factories producing silver-inlaid metallic vessels. The discovery created an immediate sensation. The original report was even published in the prestigious Scientific American magazine in 1852, sparking intense debates among scientists, historians, and the public. Naturally, the scientific mainstream was deeply skeptical. Critics and geologists argued that the pot could not possibly be 500 million years old. They proposed more grounded explanations. Perhaps it was a Victorian-era decorative item that had accidentally fallen into a vertical rock fissure, or an old mining shaft over time, becoming embedded in mineral deposits. Others suggested it might have been a misidentified piece of 19th century hardware or a practical joke played by quarry workers. Yet, proponents of anomalous artifacts point out that the original witnesses and quarrymen swore under oath that the metal pieces were firmly embedded inside the solid rock matrix, completely sealed away from any surface cracks. Today, the actual physical location of the Dorchester pot is a mystery. It has been lost to history, surviving only in old 19th century illustrations, museum archives, and historical texts. Was it an impossible relic from a forgotten pre-human civilization, an anomalous geological fluke, or an elaborate 19th century hoax? We may never know for sure. But the Dorchester pot remains a legendary reminder of the friction between mainstream science and the mysterious anomalies that continue to challenge our understanding of time. Leaving the controversial metal vessels of America behind, our journey takes a dramatic leap across the Atlantic and backward in time to 12th century rural England. Here, in a quiet Suffolk village called Woolpit, unfolds one of the strangest, most haunting, and inexplicable folklore mysteries in recorded history, the legend of the Green Children. The events allegedly took place during the reign of King Stephen, around the year 1135. Woolpit was a typical, peaceful English village, belonging to the Abbey of St. Edmund. But one day, while local farmers were busy harvesting crops in the fields, something astonishing happened. Emerging from deep, ancient trenches known as the wolf pits, excavations once used to trap wolves, came two children, a brother and a sister. The villagers gathered around in absolute shock as they took in the children's bizarre appearance. They were completely human in shape, but their skin was tinted an unmistakable, vibrant shade of green. Their clothing was made of strange, unfamiliar fabrics, woven from materials no one in the village had ever seen before. And when they spoke to the terrified locals, they babbled in an incomprehensible tongue, uttering a language that sounded completely alien to anyone in medieval England. The villagers took the children in, bringing them to the home of a local landowner named Sir Richard de Calny. For days, the children refused to touch any of the food offered to them, weeping in despair and sheer terror. Finally, after days of starvation, some raw green beans were brought into the house. To the utter amazement of everyone present, the children grabbed the beans with excitement and eagerly devoured them. For months, beans remained their only source of nourishment until they gradually learned to eat bread and other foods, causing their unusual green skin pigmentation to slowly fade away over time. As months passed, the boy, who had grown deeply sickly and depressed, sadly fell ill and passed away. But the girl survived, learned to speak fluent English, and eventually grew up to integrate into village society. Once she learned the language, she was able to answer the questions that had baffled the kingdom. Where did they come from? According to the girl's account, they hailed from a mysterious land called St. Martin's Land, a twilight realm where the sun never truly shone, and where everything was bathed in an eerie, perpetual green light. She explained that she and her brother had been tending their father's cattle when they wandered into a dark cave. Following the sound of underground bells, they walked through a long subterranean tunnel and somehow emerged out into the bright sunlight of Woolpit, completely disoriented and unable to find their way back. For centuries, historians and researchers have tried to unravel the truth behind this medieval riddle. Skeptics and medical historians have proposed rational explanations. Perhaps the children suffered from chlorosis, a severe form of iron deficiency anemia that causes a greenish discoloration of the skin, and perhaps they were Flemish orphans abandoned in the forests after political purges. Yet, alternative history and UFO enthusiasts look at the tale through a wildly different lens. They point to the story of subterranean realms, strange light, and an unknown language as one of the earliest recorded accounts of interdimensional travel. or even an encounter with extraterrestrial beings who fell through a rip in spacetime. Whether it is a misunderstood medical anomaly, a surviving fragment of displaced medieval refugees, or a genuine fairy tale wrapped in cosmic mystery, the green children of Woolpit continue to fascinate the imagination. They stand as a timeless reminder that right on the edge of recorded history, reality and myth blur together, leaving us to wonder what other strange worlds might be hidden just beneath our feet. As we look back at these extraordinary mysteries, from ancient petroglyphs and metallic vessels locked in solid stone to children emerging from a twilight world, one profound truth becomes clear. History is not a neat, finished story written in stone. It is a vast, fragile puzzle with missing pieces. These anomalous discoveries challenge our assumptions, reminding us that for thousands of years, human beings have left behind echoes of a past far stranger, deeper, and more mysterious than our textbooks ever dare to admit.